Hello and welcome to the Friendzone. I'm your AroAce host, Ahna, or if the captions auto-generated are to be believed, then I'm your Airways host, Ahna, and, coffee or tea? So, this is... I spent a day with Repulsed Aromantics, Anthony Padilla. I believe I've seen this once before, but it's been since the day it was posted, I think. 2 years ago. Well, that doesn't seem right. That was like yesterday, even though I can't remember it well. That's neither here nor there. Reacting. Here we go.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Visit.
I just want to say never ever use BetterHelp. It does not help. They're not qualified people. There's nothing, they don't do background checks or scans. They don't hire real therapists. It could be anyone behind that screen. It could even be some sort of like AI machine learning that could definitely just tell you to off yourself. So like, please do not do that. Talk to a real professional or someone in your life you can trust. Do not use BetterHelp, ever.
My name's Anthony Padilla, and today I'll be spending a day with Aromantics to learn the truth about this largely undiscussed romantic orientation in which people experience little to no romantic attraction whatsoever. By the end of this video, we'll find out how romantic orientation relates to sexual orientation and what dating and even marriage looks like for one of our Aromantic guests. Is the idea of romantic love simply a construct that's been implanted in us by society, or
50-50. 60-40.
are some of us simply born with or without the desire for any romantic affection whatsoever?
Once again, 50-50.
Hello, Divinity.
Hi.
Nick.
What up?
Madeline. Where do you fall on the Aro spectrum?
Fully.
Fully, 100%?
100% aromantic.
An Aro's Aro, like I am aromantic, romantic repulsed.
Full Aro, I am romantic repulsed, so I'm like pretty far along like the aromantic spectrum.
Same here.
Or you could say holding hands out in public or things that feel too coupley end up feeling very uncomfortable for me. Or if I feel somebody is like falling for me, I just don't have that emotion to throw back at them.
How often do you have people say, oh, you just haven't found the right one?
Oh, maybe you have avoidant attachment style. Maybe you're a narcissist. And the biggest one, of course, is,
oh, you just ain't met me yet.
it's like, at this point, I am convinced, like, it's just not going to happen.
Do you have people often assuming that it's just trauma-based or something to do with your childhood?
For me, it's always kind of been a part of who I was. Even as a child, I never even wanted that much touch from my parents.
I have that as well. Like, I was never... future editor me, see if you can put in that photo I have from even in kindergarten, where it was mandatory to be hugged. And this isn't just like an Aro thing, this is very much like a sensory, a lot of people are touch averse even if they aren't A-spec. But I was definitely that kind of person on mandatory hug day, which was, actually I say mandatory hug day, that was every day. Where it'd be like, aren't you excited? You jump off this stump and you run into my arms. And minded, this is like a stranger, a teacher, but like, she wasn't my parents. I wasn't interested. Yeah, I wonder, since there's so few studies on anything A-spec, or specifically, like, most studies about A-spec people are secondhand trying to study something else, and then we show up as an abnormality. So I would love to see an actual study on the correlation between being touch-averse or touch-repulsed and A-spec identities, and how that differs from AroAce, AroAce, and AroAce. And see if that makes a difference. Or if there's a stronger correlation. But I suppose that would also be hard to remove from societally coded touch. Like, it may seem to appear from the data that A-spec people don't like touch, but it could also be how that touch is perceived. Because if it's perceived as romantic, like, I'd be fine, I think, with, I was gonna say, like, holding hands or shaking hands or something, but I still think that's gross and, like, a huge transfer of germs. But, like, if something was seen as romantic coded, it might be repulsive, but if we lived in a society where such things were completely platonic, or could be in the right situations perceived romantically or sexually coded, but isn't the main idea people have in their heads, I wonder if people would be, A-specs would have a higher percentage then of being fine with touch. If you have any link to any of those studies or your personal experience, I'd love to hear that, so please comment that.
Rough upbringing. I actually went to therapy to see if that was the reason why I wasn't connecting with people as I was putting it. It was actually kind of harmful. A lot of therapists and people don't know what that is. They don't have a vocabulary for it. So when I'm describing this, it sounds like something else clinically. So they're trying to treat that instead of like giving me tools that will help me uncondition the things that I thought I was supposed to be because of who I am.
So they're looking at it as something to fix something that's wrong or
Yes.
broken,
Yeah.
instead of saying, how can we make you not feel shame for
Exactly.
not having this?
That's another thing is, this is related to being asexual, but there's, what is that term? It's the medicalized, HSD. Yeah, so a lot of doctors or people you'll go to, especially when you say that you're ace, will probably assume you have off-balanced hormones or something like hypoactive sexual desire disorder, HSDD, and sexual aversion disorder. Sad. Didn't realize that was what it's called. And insist that that's what you're experiencing. And a lot of the times you'll be asked, well, in order to get a diagnosis for this, does your asexuality cause you distress? But that's a really weird thing to parse out for yourself, because what kind of distress? Because in an idealized society where no one judges me for it, would being asexual bother me? Never. But if you're made to feel wrong by your society, if it's the way that people make you feel about who you are, then that causes distress. So it seems like asexuality would be the cause for distress, but underneath, it's not. So that can be a place where a lot of people get really tripped up in trying to find out their own identity and parse whether or not something really is wrong with them. Because so many people feel that deep shame and guilt and worry for who they are. And especially, this was something I experienced to a lesser degree than a lot of people experience it, but still I experienced. That being fine with asexuality, like, I realized that about myself, fortunately, pretty young. Had I known what it was, I would have realized much sooner. Middle school wouldn't have been so awkward. But it was even harder to acknowledge that I was aro. And I see this mirrored in so many different aerospaces. Like NASA. No. But the fact that, you can, the idea of love is so pervasive, and so many stories are written about it. It's said to be the best experience on Earth, and it's something that without it, a lot of society will claim that the absence of love is what makes someone monstrous. And I think having to unpack that about yourself and realize, like, where do I go from here? What does that mean when I don't apply to what society's standards of even a good or moral person is? Because nothing about your A-spec identity or anything inherent to yourself makes you immoral. But it's definitely treated that way. Where, like, asexuality receives a lot of stigma when people know what it even is. But there's this very specific feeling of acknowledging that you will not, you inherently, based on who you are, will never truly fit into the society that's built around you and built foundationally on the idea that everyone desires someone. I don't know where I'm going with that rant. I'm going to shut my mouth and watch the video more and see if I can kind of, you know, pick up some words and language, have some jumping off points to kind of explain further.
When did you start realizing that there was something different in the way that you felt romantic attraction?
No, conservative Christian. So like they have like all these little classes and stuff to try to teach you how to be a wife. It's very creepy. You need to like tell God what you want in a partner. I was like watching everybody like write all this stuff down, and I was just like staring at the paper like, what for? Like, for what?
I had this exact same, not this exact same experience, but I remember, you know, it's like a fun childhood thing. I got this sleepover book from Barnes & Noble. First of all, shout out to Barnes & Noble. I know it's a company, but, and you know, I don't trust them for that, but I absolutely loved having, like, going in there and reading all the books and just, like, sitting in the, sometimes the children's corner, but I'd, like, browse around everything. I love books. The whole place, it smells like books, and it's just great, and I want to buy everything, but it's all way too expensive. But tangent aside, I had a little sleepover book that was like 4 girls, and looking back on it, it's very like very stereotypical. Instead of asking about your life or the fun things you do, it's all about like, who's your favorite boy? If you had a celebrity crush, would you kiss him? And like so much of the marketing towards teen and tween girls is just all about, once again, your relationship to other people, and you bond with your friends based on who you think is cute. And that's not so much a thing, I don't think, with guys. And that's part of why I always kind of envied guys as a kid. Like, I never wanted to be a guy, I just wanted to be treated like a guy. Which might just be, like, the code for, you know, respect. Or being treated like a person without being treated like an accessory to someone else. But yes, rambling rant aside again, there was this little book, and in it the questions were something like, you know, describe your ideal guy. Or maybe ideal date, but probably ideal guy, because of course, heteronormativity. And these little check box marks, checks mix, testing, check, mic check, 1, 2, 3. These little check marks, check mark boxes, box checks. What? What are you talking about? There were these little check boxes, for, you know, your sort of ideal guy. And I could not for the life of me think what to write. I was like, I think I just wrote in big letters, why does it matter? And looking back, I think that should have been a clue. I'm dying to see a comedy show where it's about someone A-spec going through their life and then, like, reviewing it and seeing all of the, like, you know, sort of painfully hilarious moments of, like, why didn't you know that? Where you, like, definitely should have realized, and I think would have realized, had you even known what it was, you know?
That was never something that I did or fantasized about, and like, I don't picture it in my mind. There's no list. Windows error 404. It just never compute for me. That.
How long ago did you find the term?
I'd say like 2 years.
Going on a little over a year and a half.
7 years ago or so, probably on Tumblr. I can't quite remember, but I'm sure that's where.
What were those memes? Caduceus Clay spotted. That's another thing, is I feel like there's so little representation that anytime anyone is Aro, I know about it. People are like, hey, have you heard that this character is Aro? And I'm like, yeah. I knew 15 seconds after they released it. I'm keeping track of everything. Got the mental database, you know, the whole list of everyone. Which isn't, it's not like it's hard, it's not like a library, it's more like a magazine.
Quite remember, but I'm sure that's where
I feel like that's a cliche for like someone to find their identity on Tumblr.
Yeah, it's so true. But it was
That was actually the first place I came out as Aro. I had it in my bio that I was definitely Ace, and then I was like, should I put Aro in there? Am I Aro? And I didn't do it. I think I made my account 2016, 2018. I'd been browsing Tumblr memes on Pinterest for a lot longer than that because I was scared to join the actual website. But I remember 2019, I was like, okay, I've been thinking about putting Aro in there. I'm just going to put that in there, and then if it doesn't fit, I can just erase it. That was also the same day I talked to a friend, and she'll probably never watch this or even know how much her insignificant action she didn't even know related to me, how much it meant to me. But we went to the dollar store, and we had a conversation on the way to the car, because she was, of course, woefully in love with some random dude that I was like, who is this guy? Like, this, you know, like, you deserve better, but whatever. And she asked me what my situation was. She knew I was Ace, but she was like, what? Do you think of anyone? It's totally fine if you don't, but, like, do you have anyone in mind? And I was like, maybe someday, but it's not like giving up, I don't think that I want that. And she didn't really say anything about it, she just kind of nodded and was like, that's cool. And so then I was like, oh, maybe I'm, like, accepted? Like, maybe it's not that weird, to be Aro. And I would have stuck with it even if she didn't approve, but we walked into the store, and I found one of those, like, cheap, kitsch little, like, live, laugh, love aisles. And in it was a little green sign with an arrow through it. It just says, hooray! But not, like, with an exclamation point or anything, just, hooray! Showed that to her, made a joke of it, and she was like, I'm gonna buy you that. I think you have the sarcasm to pull that off, and I don't, so here you go. And I still have that to this day. Prominently displayed in my room. So I won't call you by your name online, and I don't know if you'll ever find this, but... thank you. You didn't realize what your gesture meant at the time, and I'm sure you didn't link that it was green with an arrow through it and a celebration, but it felt personal to me, and I've had Aro in my Tumblr bio ever since, and it's not gonna change.
I was like, oh my god, this is me.
Right.
Like, I was just like, cool, like now I don't even have to worry about it.
If I had known that it's normal to just not do that, it would have saved me a lot of crap. It seems like it goes from like friends to dating to sex, but like why can't you just f your best friend?
Good question. I've never considered that.
You should.
How do people typically react when they find out that you're aromantic?
They ask me if I'm a psychopath.
Yep. That's kind of like the simplest breakdown of stereotypes is like if you say that you're Aromantic Asexual, and if they know what that means, they're like, aw, a baby. If you say you're Aloe, then they're like, oh, the villain. And then if you say you're AroAce, they're like, aw, a robot. And those are not true. They're People are not a monolith, and being ace most certainly does not make you an innocent little baby. And I hate that. I despise that. I despise being treated like a child as a child, and I despise being infantilized now. So seeing it for other people as well, I'm just like, that's the kill switch where I'm like, don't do that to me. Don't do that to them.
Really? Is that a common question?
It is.
Very.
They think that romance equals empathy. If you can't be
I think also empathy is such a charged thing, and that's even a lot of A-spec spaces are trying to, still very much stuck in that mode of trying to align with their oppressors and earn their love at the expense of their community. And I don't think they realize that's what they're doing, because if they did, they would stop. But by hurting the people like you in your own community to try and gain favor with those that hate you, you will always be on thin ice. Your oppressors will never love you back, and you'll be the first to go when things start getting, when they start restricting it again, for control or power. And I think a lot of the A-spec community is still very hung up on empathy. It's like, oh, I'm not a psychopath, I don't murder people, I don't hurt people for fun. I feel empathy. And I think what's really important is compassion. Because you can genuinely be a psychopath or a sociopath, and that doesn't mean you'll ever hurt anyone in your life. You may not want to even hurt people. It's not a needs to hurt people disorder, it's a does not feel empathy. So it can make it harder to connect, and it's a long learning journey to be able to work with other people. But that's compassion. And empathy and lack of it is so demonized in ways that it never should be. And I think that's something that the neurodivergent community, I mean, being a psychopath or a sociopath, or combined under being having a social personality disorder, is a part of neurodiversity, and a lot of people who are neurodiverse in any way really struggle with empathy. They have low empathy or no empathy, and that will never make you wrong or a bad person. It's only your actions and what you choose to do. And thought crimes are not real, and it's about what you do and how willing you are to learn, not who you are inherently. And I don't think being low empathy or no empathy should ever need to be fixed. It's perfectly acceptable and wonderful, and I think that's something that the A-spec community should have in mind, and a lesson it should have at its core.
I can still feel deep, deep connections with my wife. I can feel deep connections with my friends, my best friends.
I would say my dating pool is very small because, majority of people are looking for someone to just be all about them and fall in love with them and make them feel all the feelings they want to feel in those kind of dynamics. And I don't have the capacity for that.
You were telling me a story about how you posted something talking about your accomplishments.
Yeah.
And you mentioned being aromantic in it.
I posted on Facebook saying that I was really happy where I was in my life and really enjoying my singleness. Somebody went out of their way to tell me.
And that's where you're gonna die alone.
And I was just like,
because you need a romantic relationship to die with someone, to have someone there for you.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's also really weird. First of all, the assumption that dying alone is bad, and something that everyone dreads the most to their core. But two, that if you're talking about the physical experience of not having anyone around when you die, it doesn't matter what relationships you're in. You could be going for a trip and get hit by a bus, or lots of darker topics I could go into, but life is random, and you never know what you're going to get. And so the assumption, one, that Aromantics aren't going to die alone, even if they've found someone. Untrue. But also, even if you are aro, like, you could have your beloved pet there with you, you could have friends, you could have an entire community that you've helped that deeply, deeply care for you and will be there at your funeral. You know?
There are way worse things in life than being single.
And do people ever call you a tease or a flake when they find out that you are not interested in romance?
Yes, because they have expectations around what conventionally attractive people should behave like and what we should want in life.
So
right?
you should have expectations put on you because you are attractive.
Yeah, attractive woman must be in need of a man or a woman or somebody to love.
Right.
I think I see a lot of that, like, that really gross notion that you're a waste. Like, if you are really pretty or handsome or attractive in some facet, a lot of people will act like you're stealing something from them. Like you've refused to bless the world with your wonderful kissing someone? Dating? Sex? I don't know. Like, oh, you'll never belong to anyone, and that means you're ruined. I'm like, actually, fun fact, I'm a person with feelings, and I think I deserve to be alive simply for having existed ever.
And what does being aromantic mean in relation to gender?
Gender, sexuality, and romantic inclinations are also separate.
All three very different things.
Yeah, you
I think that's also really interesting. I feel like, for me, being A-spec completely changes my relation to gender. Because a lot of the gendered aspects of being a woman or being a man rely heavily on how you interact with others or the opposite sex. And because I'm inherently not interested in any of those things, I feel like I will never fully be able to perform gender, because gender is a performance. And I didn't bother to read my lines. I went home and slept.
I actually really love cuddling. Like, I'm a big fan.
Because you don't see that as romance?
Yeah, like, it's not like romance. It took me a while to learn as I was kind of navigating being aro and dating, is that, like, two people could be sharing the same experience, but experiencing it very differently. Cuddling for some people is like, oh, we're romantic. And cuddling for me is just like, no, I like the physical touch and being close, you know?
I've never understood why people like cuddling. I always feel like it's really awkward, and like someone's arm always ends up like tingling pins and needles because it's pinned, or you're like weird. People are just very bony and uncomfortable. So I don't understand it, but I'm glad that other people enjoy it and enjoy that closeness, and glad that it's being destigmatized and it's more of a like any sort of relationship or connection you have to someone. You know, it doesn't inherently mean one or the other. You don't have to pick between what's a platonic and a romantic action or a sexual action, or you can just enjoy the closeness without thinking too much of it.
Do you consider yourself part of the LGBTQIA community?
That's what the A stands for. By the way, if anyone is watching this and they were like, A for ally, it's not. Being a part of the queer community. I myself actually had a complicated story with that. Because I'm very much someone who was very non-normative, even as a child, and I think it would creep a lot of adults out. So I always kind of grew up with a fear of hurting people. And I would never want to hurt people. You know, I was like never physically abused or anything. But people were always very quick to react and freak out for things I thought were insignificant. And it hurt emotionally. I don't think a lot of people didn't seem to treat me like a person. A little bit more like an animal that was kind of entertaining, but ultimately needed to learn its place and shut up because they were doing something more important. Fortunately, my parents were not among them. Shout out to my parents for being really loving. But I grew up with that fear of hurting people, and so Tumblr is also very like or just the internet in general, the spaces I was on, were all about never hurting anyone's feelings. And so therefore, as a child, I came across so many posts. I grew up in that perfect age to be online during the Great Ace discourse of around 2015, and claimed that I was hurting people and that I was a horrible monster, forever trying to consider myself a part of the queer community if I was A-spec in any capacity, because I was some sort of infiltrator or just one of the straights trying to be special. And that really bothered me for a long, long time. I did not consider myself part of the LGBTQ community. I think it was just LGBT at the time, is what a lot of people were saying. And it turns out those people were wrong and awful, actually. Because being A-spec is inherently queer, and you are a part of the queer community. Whether you want to accept that label, you don't have to, but anyone who tells you you shouldn't be there is wrong. And I do now strongly consider myself part of the queer community. And that's LGBTQIA+, you know, that whole mouthful. But A stands for Aromantic, Asexual, and Agender. And probably some other things I haven't thought of, but that is what it stands for, and it's inherently a part of it.
Myself part of the community, but like kind of more so because other people have told me that I am. I do not intersect with the community in any other aspect, so it's a little bit, because like I'm cis, I'm straight, male, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm aro, and they're like, oh, cool, you're part of the community now, and I'm like, oh, am I? But then there's a lot of people in the community that are like, oh, well, you don't suffer like how we suffer, so you're not part of the community. I'm like, oh, okay. So I don't typically...
And I think also a big misconception about the queer community, and especially within the queer community, is that you have to have suffered. And suffering is in, you know, being identified in the streets and discriminated against. But the queer community, the only prerequisite is to be queer to society, out of the norm. And that's something that's very fundamentally built into being A-spec. Things aren't built to hurt you, but they aren't built to help you either. That's interesting that that's the only person they asked. I would like to have seen the other two's ideas of it, because it seems to promote the idea just from the one guy saying it, that that's the final truth.
Do you go on dates?
Yes, I guess I would say I date. I'm a great in-between dude. Like, if you need somebody in between your last relationship and your next relationship, I'm here.
You're totally cool with being a rebound?
Oh, 100%. So that's like where I shine, bro.
I'm married, so no.
Did you ever date?
No, we actually never dated, ever. Because we spent the first part of our relationship in the closet. I had her come and live in my house with my parents, and we became roommates.
And they were roommates.
My parents for 2 years didn't know that we were more than roommates.
But not romantically. So it's like you had to hide that romance in public.
A couple years later, we got married.
So do you hold hands to make sure that she has her needs met?
Yeah, for sure. Since she is inclined to hold hands, or she's inclined to sit with me on the couch, physical touch to her is very important. So I make sure that I'm present for her, and she knows that since I'm kind of touch-averse in general, and that I am aromantic, that I know when she reaches out in that way, it means something. Say you hate the color yellow, but your partner loves seeing you in yellow. Once or a couple times a year, to make them happy, you put on some yellow for them, and you're like, oh man, this is garbage. But they look at you and they do the whole thing where they're like, you're in yellow, you look so handsome. You do it.
Especially if it's not like, it doesn't hurt me,
Exactly.
it doesn't take something away from me.
Exactly.
It's just an aversion.
There you go. It's just like, God, why do I have to be in yellow? Why do you have to like this? But do you love me? I'll wear yellow.
Yeah. Do you still desire companionship?
I personally am one of those people that wants to have a companion. I want to be around someone like me. Just because I don't feel romantic inclinations doesn't mean that I don't want a companion.
I could never live with anyone, and I'm not the like, I have to have a partner type.
Is that because it feels like coupling up?
Yeah, I get repulsed
Yeah.
by anything that even resembles that type of like coupling. Like I
Yeah, I'm very much I relate to that as well. Like, it feels like even tying yourself to someone, it's not like a commitment issues thing, but just no longer being you're you and so. Like, that sense of you own a part of them, they own a part of you. I find that very discomforting to my soul. I don't want that kind of connection or closeness with someone. I'm not even sure I can feel that even platonically. I've never. Maybe when I was a kid, I think I had strong friendships, but I haven't really since. In any sort of recent memory, past few decades. So, with that, I don't talk to or meet many people. So it's a possibility. I don't feel as strongly repulsed by friendship as I do with a romantic relationship or any sort of anything with other people. But I'm very much kind of the stereotypical, like, I resent that every representation of someone like me is a robot or an alien. But it does very much, like, I am sort of robotic and alien. And it's not the common experience, but it's just so interesting to see the complete, wonderful, like, diversity of even just a small subsection of people. Because people are so infinitely diverse. So just the wealth of experiences that you can see available. I love when when I can connect to someone, and relate, and I also love when I hear about someone's experience where they're the same label as I am, but experience things so drastically differently. I find it all very interesting.
And so it's just kind of getting filtered differently.
So they're like,
Communication.
Divinity, I am in love with you.
And I just go like it's just all about communication. So I feel like there is a tendency to feel like I did something wrong or whatever by not communicating enough, maybe, of who I was, right? But then at the end of the day, people cannot make themselves be one or the other. So if you see that the connection is going in a direction where someone's going to end up hurt, it's time to sit down and talk.
Is it possible for aromantic people to feel heartbreak?
Yes.
I've been heartbroken by a friend. The betrayal of a friend, or finding out that you really loved someone as a friend and you thought that they were like in your corner and that they were your person, and you find out that like what you were experiencing with them, they were just like not really experiencing with you, or they were trying to use you in some way to some advantage. It's still very hurtful.
I think a lot of the time, the very mononormative idea is that your friends are sort of a flippant, like, oh, they don't really mean much to you, but like they're entertaining until you find the one. And then you ditch all of your friends. They could, fall off a bridge or die or whatever. It doesn't matter. You found the one. And I feel like that just really... That's the thing about mononormativity, right? Like, it hurts everyone. It doesn't matter your orientation. It's still always sort of poisonous. And I've been really heartened to see when people still value their friends as much as their partner, or especially you read like Reddit posts of people being like, I just got a new partner last week and she's saying I should never talk to any of my friends again and that she should be the most important person in my life. So I cut her off because I've been friends with my friends for 20 years and nothing will replace that just because I feel this romantic feeling. It doesn't make it better than this platonic feeling. And I find that heartening, and sort of secretly in my heart of hearts, I'm like, yes! Finally.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, there's no real other way for it to hurt but in your heart.
Heartbreak is the same thing.
We've been taught that heartbreak is associated with romance, or that destruction of our expectations of romance.
Yeah. Have you ever dropped your toast? Butter side down?
Always goes butter side down because of the weight. It's so annoying. Especially when you're like, yay, toast, and you feel that, like, thrill of, like, I'm gonna have some toast because I'm really hungry. Not related to anything, but does anyone ever have that, like, random, like, 1 week in a year where, like, toast is just everything? You're like, I will have toast for every meal. It's going to be buttered. I can put peanut butter on it. I can put jam. I'm gonna have some toast and some tea, and it's going to be the most amazing thing, where it's like buttered toast and water is incredible. Don't know why that happens, or if that's just a weird me thing. But, yeah. Leave that in the comments if you've ever experienced that. You know, tell me. Please. Do not let me be the weird toast girl.
That's
No,
heartbreak.
but it sounds f***ing horrible.
That's heartbreak.
They just blipped that out there, didn't they? But didn't reflect that in the captions.
Have you ever dropped your toast? Butter side down? That's
No,
heartbreak.
but it sounds f***ing horrible.
It does not sound really horrible. That's also a pet peeve of mine, is like, if you're going to bother to put captions in, don't censor them. If it's not censored in the thing, or if it is censored in the thing, write the thing and then have that it's been bleeped out, not just replace it with another word, because it's not accurately captioned to the content of the film.
Why do you think there are skeptics out there who don't believe that aromanticism exists at all? That say, no, this is a human trait that we are all born with.
No matter where you look, like there's romance everywhere, from stories, commercials, movies.
Oh yeah, to the point where we are taught that we are broken if we aren't finding, or at least making it our life's mission to find that romance.
Exactly, and so it just is completely out of some people's realm of like imagination that someone is outside of that system.
Yeah.
Because it's so permeated throughout our system. It's literally a non-issue. Like I don't even think about it.
You don't know what
You
you've
don't
never
know.
had.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's also a weird way to put it. You don't know what you've never had. Implying that, like, if you ever did feel romance, you'd be like, oh, this thing that I've been missing, or this thing that I would suffer with. I don't know. It just leaves sort of a weird feeling for me personally.
Love, like romantically, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I don't.
People don't like the idea that they've been duped. So if they see an aromantic person that's kind of over it, and they lived their whole lives according to the idea of romance they've been taught and it's not working for them, they're going to attack aromantic people because we, quote, figured it out.
Do you feel...
I think that's something I really am exceedingly grateful for. Being Aro is having been inherently left out. Like, yes, it can feel isolating and not quite lonely, but some negative, frustrating feeling I can't quite put to words. But I've never confused my desire for something enough to force myself into a situation I don't want. And I see that happen to so many people all the time, where there's a sort of false logic of, because I feel X, I must feel Y. Because I feel X, I must do Y. You know, like, all of these situations where it doesn't really suit anyone in them, but because it's the expectation, it gets one party hurt, or it gets everyone hurt, and it doesn't end well. And I'm like, if you knew that there were options, like, you don't have to be Aro to trust your own gut and be kind to yourself and not do the things that you don't want to.
Get it?
I know a lot of that's just cultural. Like, saying you're aromantic could possibly mean different things depending on where you're from. Aromantics from different parts of the world, whatever that culture deems to be romance, might affect how their aromanticism presents.
And I am dying for studies on that, or like alternate perspectives. Because I try to find those things on YouTube, but I am limited by the fact that for now. I only speak English. And I'm on English web servers, and more particularly American web servers, which American media does everything in its power to only ever talk about American media. But yeah, if you have like links to videos or things you feel yourself, if you're somehow accessing this video from somewhere else, I'm dying to know. So if you're thinking like, should I comment, should I not, please do. You will make one Aro person very happy.
My dad's side.
Do you think that you would view romantic gestures the same way as you do, with repulsion, if there were absolutely no societal standards or any kind of cultural idea of what that meant or was ever established in the first place?
I don't think that the repulsion would exist in a society like that, because everything would fall under the umbrella of this is just how we treat people that we care about.
Mm-hmm.
But
I feel like that would change for me with romance repulsion, but I'm still very much like with sex repulsion, like someone takes off their clothes and I'm like, no, like it's gross to see bodies in motion for me. So like even I'm going to like a museum and it's, the birth of Venus or something, and I'm like, oh, very nice. I'm really appreciating the art. But for some reason that still creeps me out even. And I'd like to clarify never that it's the fault of the artist or the person. Like, it's still good art, it's not my thing.
because those like conditionings and indoctrinations are there, then it's a set of behaviors where you start to recognize, oh, you're doing that because of this, and I don't want the this, so don't do that.
So do you think that
Very well explained. I like that.
anyone would do romantic gestures if they were never taught to them?
If they were never taught to us, and there were people who wanted to show someone how special they were, they would, I think too, would do it without hesitation. And I do think that if it wasn't taught to us that way, I wouldn't have the repulsion with the romantic stuff.
Before we continue learning about the world of Aromantics, do you have any interest in parenting or having kids?
Is this gonna be a BetterHelp commercial? No, it's a purple commercial. I don't care. Ads will perish by my blade.
The order sponsor create a party once and seamless, throwing and be where and try. Do you have any interest in parenting or having kids?
Both of us are completely against it.
That has nothing to do with you being aromantic.
No, it just has me being child averse.
Child repulsed.
Child repulsed. Yeah, I see one and I push it away.
I had a funny conversation with a friend of mine. So he's like, oh, so you're aromantic, right? I'm like, yeah. He's like, so you're never gonna have kids? And I was like, actually, I'm really excited about having kids sometime. And he was like, how are you gonna do that? And I was like, oh, I'm just gonna ask a friend and just co-parent. And he was like, you can't do that. And I was like, why can't I? And you could see his gears spinning where like, dude, if you want to do this, it's a package deal. You have to do everything.
If you want a kid, you have to be in love. Just like all the parents out there who accidentally had their children.
And I feel like he felt like he was cheated because he never thought to think outside of the box.
I do. Given the chance, I would love to be a mother. I would love to co-parent and just like have a best friend that I have a child with.
You don't need to have a romantic connection between two parents to parent a
As
child.
long as our core values line up, that's what matters, right? It's not, as long as that person's like respectful and loving and honest, and there's so many other attributes that you look for in someone that you want to do something that's big with that don't involve being in love with them.
I also think that a lot of people, because they're never told that thinking outside of the box is an option, they package that all those steps have to be there. You feel attracted to someone, so you date them, so then you marry them, so then you have kids together. And that's so limiting to so many people. And I feel like it's better that a child never exists, instead of a child being raised by someone who doesn't have the resources for them, or doesn't love them, or can't give them a good life. As far as the planning phase, it's much different when there's an actual living child in the world. And that changes, their needs accordingly. But I also think a lot of love fades. And that's not in, like, it's evil sort of condemnation. But I think that there's a lot of that feeling that gooey, mushy, romantic love towards someone is not enough to raise a child together. Because I think sometimes when you trap yourself, some people trap themselves in marriage. And I think sometimes it hurts more to be trapped with two parents who hate each other but are staying for you. You can feel like a burden, or like you're the only thing keeping two people together who are miserable. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And I feel like there's such a lie, like the mononormativity of it, once again, is that love stays forever, and love, romantic love, and attraction are what keep a good family together. Personally, with my parents, are they in love anymore? I don't think they have been for a long time. But I do know that they've worked together. They truly care about each other. I don't think in a giddy romantic sense, but they're very much... They've learned how to grow together and make decisions, and for the most part learn to be easy with each other and accept each other for who they are. And it's always a growing process, but I'm glad they figured it out as more of a friendship and responsibility and deeply caring about someone sort of thing. And that's something a lot of marriages and relationships fall apart for. And I would wish that more people's parents found peace with each other outside of expectation.
Eventually.
All right, you got 5 seconds to shout out or promote anything you want directly into camera.
Sick. At Nick Hampshire on YouTube, Instagram, all that stuff. NickHampshire.com. I'm a LA-based photographer, influencer, so hit me up if you'd like to do some work.
So you can find me on Instagram at officiallydivinity, and if you like my hair, you can follow me at Lulu Gotti.
Ask me and my wife any questions you want at our Instagram, mystical AroAces, and hail Satan.
Yo, everybody go follow Anthony Padilla. My man is dope. His channel is so fire, and he has curly hair like me, so
You know what that means. You gotta subscribe.
you gotta subscribe.
Well, there you have it. I spent a day with Aromantics, and I feel like I understand the idea of romance a little bit more. And I'm realizing just how many things we feel are intrinsically human that may just be intrinsically cultural. How many things do we feel shame for not feeling or not doing right when we're actually perfectly healthy exactly as we are?
I really just want to specifically thank Anthony Padilla for like creating a series that reaches out to so many different people, and his willingness to expand his mind and share different perspectives and everything along that line. When this video first came out, it was kind of the only place I could find easily access an interview that was taken seriously of anything A-spec. And I'll be doing sort of a similar reaction to this too. I spent a day with asexuals, but just to see someone outside of the niche little cultural group care about our opinions and representation and seem genuinely interested, not only to learn, but also actively learning, it seems. I just, thrilled that it's there. So that about wraps it up. I'm Ahna. I've been your AroAce host from the Friendzone, here on the channel Mundane Meow. If you liked anything I've made, feel free to subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next one.